Let's talk about how much house you can really afford. I'm Dino the Realtor. Let's get into it. I have clients calling me every day, and one of the biggest questions that they're asking is, how much house can I really afford in this market? I want to break down for you how to figure out how much house you can really afford. A lot of people are sitting on the sideline right now thinking to themselves that they want to make a home purchase, or maybe they want to wait a little bit till the market improves, but they are curious. How much of a mortgage payment can I deal with right now and still be comfortable? And how much house does that equate to? Well, I'm gonna break this down for you in a couple different ways so you can understand exactly what it takes to figure out how much house you can buy. So you have two components here that are important. Number one is your monthly payment, okay? You have your monthly payment that you need to figure out, how do I come up with a payment that I'm still comfortable, that I can still pay my bills? And the second one is, how much savings do I have to take care of this down payment? So let's dive into the first one right now. How do I know how much payment I can afford so I can determine how much house I can afford? Now, I used to be in the mortgage business doing mortgage loans for 15 years. So I'm pretty familiar with how you break down your payments and how they break down how you can qualify for the mortgage based on your income. One of the things that they do in this calculation is they have something called a debt ratio. Now, your debt ratio is basically, what are your bills gonna look like after you have a mortgage compared to your income? And they basically have a calculation where they'll say, you can't go over 44% is like the typical guideline percentage-wise of what your income is. So let's just say that you make $10,000 a month, $4,400 should be the most that you're spending on your bills, like your mortgage, your car, basically anything that shows up on your credit report goes into that number. So when you look at that debt ratio, it says, all right, that's at least 40% of where my bills are. I always try to say, be more conservative, try to make sure that number's a little bit less, but let's try to get into how we look at this number and how you get to a number that's comfortable, because just because the bank says you can get approved for a certain amount doesn't mean that that's going to make you the most comfortable when you're living in your home. So when I was doing this years ago, we had this big old calculator that you had to figure out the payments on, and there were all types of different computations that you would have to go through to try to figure out what's the payment. Well, in this new day and age, they have a great tool, and that tool is very easy. It's Google. It's so easy. If you take a look at this real quick, I want you to see what I normally use on a daily basis to come up with mortgage payments, so I can figure out before my people get in front of a lender that's going to work them out and make sure they get them a dead accurate payment. I like to be able to give them a little bit of a range so they have an idea what we're looking at. So I'll go right to Google. I'll type in mortgage calculator. If you look at the mortgage calculator, it'll have a loan amount, it'll have a rate, it'll have a term. So you know how much, let's say you want to buy a $300,000 house, you put $300,000 in. Let's say the market rate today is 5.75% or 6% or something like that. You put that rate in there. Now notice, I want you to know when you go on here, the rate's going to be higher than what the market rate normally is, okay? Like today I went on there and it was something like 6.9% that it just put in that spot. Rates are better than that if you shop around. You can literally get rates in the high 5s to low 6s right now. So you put a rate like that in there and put a 30-year term in there, and it'll shoot out a payment. Now, what is that payment? That payment will just be giving you your principal and interest. So the interest that you're going to be paying on that loan and the principal, the money that you're going to be paying that loan down by, okay? That's your principal and interest. Now, what else goes into that payment? You're going to have to compute what the taxes are on the property that you want, and you'll get an annual amount on that, and just divide that by 12 and put that on the payment. Then you have to concern yourself with homeowner's insurance. Your homeowner's insurance is something that you always need to protect the house. It normally is going to run you anywhere from $600 to $1,200 a year, depending on the size of the property. So you take that number and you divide that by 12 also. Now, most people are going into some type of loan that has a low down payment, like 3.5%, like an FHA loan or something like that. Now, if you're doing that, there's going to be mortgage insurance in your payment. The only way to avoid mortgage insurance is to put 20% down. So the mortgage insurance goes in, and now the way this is computed, it's 0.55%. Now, to make this easy, for every $100,000 you multiply by 0.55%. That's going to give you a number, and you divide that by 12, okay? So it's about $45 for every $100,000 of the loan. So you take those things, you take your principal and interest, you take your taxes, you take your insurance, and you take your mortgage insurance, and that's gonna give you your payment. So now you have your payment, and you know how to come up with that. You can look right here and say, how much house can I afford? You can go in there and change your loan amount and go up and down to see what payment's the most comfortable for you. But at least this is gonna give you a range inside of $100 to $200 of where that payment's gonna be. And like I said, once you go and talk to a mortgage professional, they're gonna break everything down on each specific property that you're looking at, so you know what the real taxes and real insurance are. This other thing here is gonna be an estimate, but like I said, at least it's gonna give you a little bit of an idea where your payments are gonna be. Now, the second part of this is savings. Like I said a little bit earlier, most of the time, people are using government programs or things where they're only having to put about 3.5% down. But we have to consider, where's that money coming from? Do we have that money saved up for closing? I know one of the biggest concerns when I talk to people who are debating between buying and renting isn't necessarily the monthly payment. It's the amount of money that you have to come to closing with. If you're looking at a $400,000 purchase and you're putting 3.5% down, that's $14,000. And then there's closing costs on top of that. And a lot of people say, I don't have that money in the bank. Most people don't even have a month of an emergency fund if something went wrong. So let's talk about how to get that money in the bank now so that you're prepared for a home purchase or an emergency down the road. One of the things in a book I read a long time ago called Automatic Millionaire, it said, pay yourself first. And it says pay yourself first, and that sounds so, easy, like, oh, of course, you just pay yourself first. But if a bill popped up, if you had an extra medical expense or some type of procedure that got done and you have that bill, you're gonna pay it. So if you can go ahead and set aside a certain percentage of your paycheck, a certain number that you're comfortable with. I'm not talking about anything that's gonna strangle you, but if you put it in there that you have a $150 bill every single month, and that bill is to pay yourself for the future, that's what you need to do. I like that they have these little apps and things like that where you can have your change rounded up, and you can go and, like, when you go to a store, you spend $5.30, it rounds it up to $6 and puts that in a savings account for you. Any mechanism of savings that you have, you need to take advantage of. But I understand we're in an economy right now where prices are going up, things are tightening up, and it's hard. It's hard to put money away when you're spending all your money at the grocery store and the gas pump and everything else that you have to spend money on. So I get it, but we have to do something to try to create some savings. I looked at some charts this past week of the savings amount that we have in this country, and it's very low. It's very low. Most people have more debt than they do savings. So let's do something to try to be proactive with that. Let's start socking away a little bit of money, even if things are tight. Take care of yourself. Pay yourself first, because it's going to put you in the position. I understand it can be a real undertaking when you're looking to buy a house and you're looking at a $20,000 bill. Of course, there are things that I've talked about in the past, like down payment assistance that you can get, and that stuff's very real. But if you're being realistic with yourself and you're looking at a real home purchase that you're going to try to create equity in down the road, the minimum is 3.5%. You got to be prepared to put that money in the bank so everything will be smooth at the time when you go to buy a house. And I completely understand when you're looking at buying a house and you have a $20,000 bill at the end of the transaction in order to close. For a lot of people, that blows you out of the water. For a lot of people, that's an undertaking that you're not willing to go to. And honestly, when you think about it, buying a house is not necessarily the right thing to do for everybody. Your timing is what's important. The timing of when you make a home purchase is what's important. Yes, there are a lot of people that are in position, that do have savings, do have that 401k, do have retirement funds on top of that. They are comfortable and they can go make that purchase today. But if you're gonna overextend yourself and try to make a purchase that you're not gonna be able to afford down the road, it's not smart. Listen, I sell real estate here in Maryland. I deal with people who do rentals. I do people that are buying homes. I do it all. And I'm gonna tell you something, each individual person, they decide what their situation is. They decide what's best for them. All they can do is look at the cards on the table and determine what's best for them. I'm here to help guide that process. And I would never want somebody to go into a transaction and then at the end have remorse because they're like, man, I really might not be able to afford this. That's why I wanted to break down how to figure out your mortgage payment. Very important, trying to figure out exactly what you can afford, but also explaining that debt ratio piece to you so you understand. The banks have that calculation in play because they know if you're under that 44% number, you should be able to afford the house once you're in it. But I always say be more conservative than that. Try to get under 40, try to get under 35% of your total income. And that way, you know, when you're in your house, not only are you comfortable, but you're still able to pay yourself first. You should never stop paying yourself first. Even when you're in that house, you want to continue to save for the future, and you'll be able to do that if you're smart about the transaction, if you're smart about how you're going about it, if you're smart about the timing of your purchase, you're going to be in a good position down the road. Absolute last thing that I would ever want to see for one of my clients or any of you guys watching this video is for you to buy a house and then a couple years down the road realize that not only can you not afford that house, but that house has literally been a ball and chain from you being able to live the type of life that you want to live. That's why I'm bringing the information. I'm hoping to create some value here so you can understand exactly what it is that you can afford. Figure out how much money do I make, how much money are all my bills, and then compute that and make sure that it's under 35%. If you're under that 35%, maybe 40%, you know you're going to be comfortable. Some banks will even stretch it out to where they'll let you get approved at 50%. But honestly, if you're in that range, you probably shouldn't buy that house. You probably should find something with a better payment because you don't want to hurt yourself down the road. So listen, I hope all this has been valuable. I really hope that you liked the video. Please drop a comment, ask a question. Please hit the subscribe button, like the video. I really appreciate you guys watching week after week. Thanks a lot. I'll talk to you the next time.